You all set? You ready? Thank you for coming out to the Ingleside. This station's very familiar to me. My first political work in San Francisco was out here when we had Captain Philpott running this district, and he got me out cleaning up graffiti through a program called Enterprise for High School Students. And we used to stack up all our cans of paint right here at the station and go out with the officers and try to battle the graffiti out here on this side of town. And that challenge continues and remains to this day, 20 years later. But it's a station that often is overlooked in this city, and it's a station that we wanted to highlight today, as well as highlight some good news as it relates to crime and violence in the city and county of San Francisco. A lot has been written in the last few years about violent crime in the city, and in particular homicides. As you know, violent crime has not gone up in the last number of years, it's gone down. But homicides have gone up, and that tends to generate the headlines and the consternation and the focus appropriately so. We today want to give you the latest crime stats, not just year to date in the last 4 months, but we want to give you a trend line over the last 6 months, and that's why we picked today, because we think a 6-month window gives you a better sense of a trend than candidly a 3 or 4 month window. And I want to share with you what has happened since September of last year, when we really had a peak of crime, particularly in the Mission and Ingleside districts, that generated a lot of concern. We also want to share with you 4 other areas of interest and concern. One relates to the mandate in 1994, the minimum staffing of police officers that was mandated by the public, and where we are vis-a-vis that mandate. We want to talk a little bit about technology in relationship to the omnibus spending bill that Speaker Pelosi has very successfully advantaged the city in relationship to some new technology that we want to communicate. And we want to give you an update on these PERF reports, these 40 recommendations that we've aggregated through all these series of reports that have been done, and how we're going to implement some of those recommendations and where we are in relation to that. I'm pleased to be joined by the Chief of Police and the Captain out here, Captain O'Leary, members of our command staff and deputy chiefs, as well as a member of the Police Commission, David Onick, who took the time to come out here, and I appreciate that, and the head of the Mayor's Office of Criminal Justice, MOCJ, Kevin Ryan. Homicides year to date are not down 6%, not down 10%. They're not down 20 or 30 or 40%. They're not down by half. Year-to-date, homicides in San Francisco are down 64%. This is not insignificant. If you look year-to-date compared to 2008, that's one thing. If you compare even to 2007, they're down well over 55% or 55.6 or so percent. We have seen, and this is the number that I actually measure success and failure as it relates to our efforts, and that's non-fatal shootings. I've always said that homicides are one thing, but shootings are something more insidious in this context, that it's an act of God almost, a quirk of fate, that someone who's shot 15 times survives, yet someone who's shot once in the leg gets a blood clot and dies. And to me, the moral equivalency argument is lost. A homicide or a non-fatal shooting, to me, have equal weight. Of course, the devastation of someone losing their life is obviously much more significant, but I think deserves equivalent amount of attention. Non-fatal shootings are down 34% in the last 2 years in this city, and I think that's a stat that's also very important. 64% decline in the homicides, 34% decline in non-fatal shootings. Where are we here in the Ingleside? Ingleside has seen a 71% decline in homicides. The Mission District this year, 100% decline in homicides. We have seen trend lines for the last 6 months that have also been significant. In the Mission, just to put it in perspective, you had 14 homicides through September. And again, you all talked a lot about those homicides in the Mission. Through September of last year, we've had just one in the last 6 months. That's one too many, but one nonetheless. We have seen non-fatal shootings out here in the Ingleside also decline by 55%, not just the reduction in homicides of 71%, but non-fatal shootings. Overall crime rate across the board, not just homicides, down 20%. Remember, last year was down, the year before was down, the year before that was down. It's down again, now 20% year to date. So these are important numbers, and these are numbers that give me some hope and confidence that we're moving in the right direction. These numbers will fluctuate, and at peril, every time we announce good news, there seems to be a series of bad news that comes out, and I can imagine this weekend it could be a difficult weekend and shatter some of the enthusiasm for the good news. But I think the public deserves to know that homicides are down over 64%. I think the public deserves to know that in hot spots of this city, they're down over 70%, and that what Chief Fong and her team are doing are working. This zone strategy is working. This strategy of saturating key areas of the city is working. Getting more police officers and foot officers out on the street is working. Our violence prevention strategies are working. The investment that we have made in the last 3 years of investing in violence prevention is now taking shape in a meaningful way. And that the men and women in uniform are doing an outstanding job in the city and county of San Francisco and deserve credit for the job that they're doing in partnership with community leaders, faith-based leaders, and others that are doing an equally outstanding job. These numbers are still too high. I still recognize we need to do more and do better. One homicide is too many. We should, by no stretch of the imagination, be pleased the fact that there have been 11 homicides year to date. That's still unacceptable, and I understand that. And there's still too many shootings. There's too many stabbings. There's still too much violent crime and property crime in the city and county of San Francisco. But these statistics bear out some positive trends. Second, we have met now the minimum staffing of police officers. First time in history. We have met the 1971 mandate that was effected and enacted in, I think, June of 1994. My recollection serves me. That number changes every day. Chief will argue every hour, because every hour of every day, someone says they're resigning, someone says that they're transferring or being laterally moved over, there's a new academy class. So these numbers fluctuate, but we finally hit that minimum staffing, and plus or minus we'll be bouncing around that number for some time, in spite of the fact that we delayed some of the academy classes. I want you to know we're being very aggressive going after the COPS dollars, these federal stimulus dollars, so that we can reestablish and advance those classes and get them moving again. We hope to get as much money for 4 classes. I don't know if we'll be that successful, but we're now getting support from the Obama administration, and so I hope we can announce that those classes will continue, and that will get us above that 1971 and secure that baseline for some time. Third thing, as I mentioned, we've been using technology, and we got $1 million bill, or rather $1 million contribution in that omnibus spending bill because of Speaker Pelosi's work on ShotSpotter technology. You recall about a year and a half ago, we were out the west side of town in the gun range, and we announced this ShotSpotter technology. We have it in Bayview, Western Addition, and the Mission. And with this $1 million, we're going to be able to roll out ShotSpotters in other communities. Folks behind me will talk more specifically about which districts ShotSpotters will go. This has already reduced typical response time by 4 minutes, which is not insignificant. 4 full minutes. We can talk again about what that means in terms of the prospect that we'll be more aggressive in terms of our investigations, more likely to be on scene when a crime is actually in the process of occurring, what that means in terms of emergency response to help victims of crimes. Nonetheless, ShotSpotters has been a success, and we thought we'd mark that progress and let you know that $1 million is going to advance and enhance our work there. The final issue is PERF, these police reviews that have been done. There was some discussion, there always is discussion, David, at your commission every Wednesday night about that. I want to leave this to the chief to talk about the first pilot implementation of some of the PERF recommendations, which I'm very enthusiastic about. We've had a reform-minded police chief. Remember, it was Chief Fong that initiated all of these reports. She has been proactive in terms of her desire to continue these reforms even after she announced her retirement. And there hasn't been a day where she hasn't been working even harder, I would argue, and more deliberative in terms of advancing these reforms since she announced that retirement, which, as you know, has been delayed for a period of time, but not forever, because she, exactly, thank you, you heard it from her. But she was kind enough in the last few months, we've had a chance to meet, to make sure that this department's in good shape as it relates to a transition to a new police chief, which, as you know, the search is underway, and I hope within the next 60 days, the latest, we'll have real clarity, and I'll have 3 outstanding choices that will come from the Police Commission, of which I will choose one of those 3. And if I don't like the 3, we'll ask for another 3 until we like who, and I know that you hopefully will see the first 3, someone that we are going to support. So that's a broad, not particularly eloquent, but broad overview of where we are. But I think it deserves some attention and merit, and I think this police department and this police chief deserve some attention and merit for a job well done under very difficult circumstances. The last 6 months, we're starting to turn the corner, and we're seeing a lot of progress. Again, it's not good enough. Things could get worse before they get even better. Again, I'm not naive to that. I understand that as much or more than anybody, but we're seeing a trend here that deserves some attention. With that, I'll ask that Chief Fong amplify some of these points and also underscore the PERF recommendations in the context of your first phase implementation of a new pilot.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good morning, everyone. First of all, I want to thank the mayor for sharing the current crime situation in San Francisco and in terms of the successes that have been accomplished by the men and women of this department working hand in glove with the community and with all of the other city agencies. We know that the officers who are on the front line are responding to proactively prevent incidents from occurring, but also responding to situations when an incident does occur. The efforts of the department in terms of a concentrated strategic measure have been made possible because of the support that's been provided to this department. If you think back to 4 or 5 years ago, we were in the 1600s, in some cases even the high 1500s in terms of the numbers of officers. There is an expectation that officers can be everywhere at every time, every moment of the day. But in reality, you do need resources. And the support of this commission, of this mayor, of this board of supervisors has resulted in our ability to bring in more officers to this department, to be able to expand every single district station in terms of the number of personnel assigned. And therefore, because of that expansion, the ability to field resources on foot, in radio cars, in plain clothes, as well as in specialized units. Now, this increase has not only helped in the district station level, but it's also helped us in our specialized units, but also in our investigations units. At the beginning of 4 or 5 years ago, we only had pretty much day watch investigators. We now have a night watch on our general work, in our general work unit, in our robbery section, and most recently, we added officers, so we now have 6 inspectors working nights in our homicide unit. We know that the sooner the investigator responds to the scene, the sooner they can work hand in glove with the line officers who are the first responders to incidents. And the more cooperation there and with the community, the better off the solving rate is and the clearance rate. So we anticipate that some of these changes made possible by the new influx of resources to the department will help us in many, many ways. The mayor talked about the phase 1 implementation. We had a lengthy presentation at last night's commission, and that information in the form of a PowerPoint will be available to you. It's on the commission website and on the department's website. The key is that we were all very hopeful to open our doors to an outside entity to look at the areas in which we were strong, but also what areas could we do better in. And so, as was mentioned, there are hundreds of recommendations that we've broken up into those that don't cost any money, but really will help us become more efficient, and that can be accomplished very quickly, as well as those that go all the way up to recommendations that would require far more discussion with the community as well as the allocation of resources. And so with all of these recommendations, the 4 bureau chiefs and their bureaus have been assigned those that are reflective of their area of responsibility, and we have broken these down and put timelines for all of the recommendations. 29 of the recommendations are actually completed. Between the time the report came out and now, we've completed those. There is a batch that will be completed within the next 3 months, 90 days. And every week we are looking at tracking these recommendations to make sure that our eye continues to look at these and moving towards implementation. We will be putting together information that will go out on a website so that you, as well as members of the community, can follow the progress of the department. This, by all means, is not a study that's going to sit, and it's not one study, it's upwards of 7 and 8 studies, including a new vision statement. These studies are not going to sit and collect dust. They are going to be brought into practice within the department, and we look forward to working with not only the community, but all of the city agencies in terms of making that happen. The largest piece of implementation is the Phase 1 implementation. To take all of these recommendations and say we're going to roll these out citywide right now is quite a challenge, because if you look at the model that has been proposed, it's really a model based on how are we going to deploy our resources in terms of responding to calls for service, but more importantly, how are we going to enhance our community partnerships, our community engagement, and our problem-solving efforts. That effort takes time, takes resources. So we are picking Ingleside Station because of a number of criteria, and you'll see that in the PowerPoint, based on the geographic size, the demographics, the staffing, the crime challenges, the number of supervisorial districts it impacts, the number of schools, the demographics of the community. We have looked at all 10 of the districts, and when you look at the PowerPoint presentation from last night, you will see Ingleside is in each of the criteria. Some of the other stations are there, but not at the same level. But even more importantly, we wanted to look at the level of community engagement. We've always said it's not the police department doing its job on its own, it's the community and the police department together. And so given the number of very active community organizations in this district, we feel that this is the ideal location. We will be looking at a model that brings in a team of resources to augment what is already here at Ingleside Station. That team will include a 5th lieutenant who will actually oversee the problem-solving and community initiatives, but not in isolation, but hand in glove with the other lieutenants and the sergeants and the officers on the watch. We also will be bringing in a crime analyst. We know how important it is to look at real-time data. We are looking at technological measures that we can implement first here at Ingleside Station that will allow that data to be available every morning. Not just crime data, but calls for service data through our Department of Emergency Management. And it's based on looking at all of that the deployment of resources will be different. In addition to that, we will have what we are calling problem-solving teams. Not to separate people out and say these are the officers who handle calls for service and these are the ones who do problem-solving, but we know that when an officer in a sector identifies a problem with the community, sometimes it takes more than just those 2 officers to come up with the solution. So they will analyze those problems and pull from the resources that will be assigned to that station to be able to solve that problem and come up with the plan to work together. It won't mean that the problem-solving officers are only problem solvers. They can work in a radio car also, because the goal is, what do we need for this? Let's say, hypothetically, you have a situation that's a a property where officers are responding to that continuously because of different types of calls. Do we allow that to continue, or do we look at that as a problem and assess what is really creating the challenges that are requiring the police response? What do we need from the police side? What do we need from other city agencies, potentially code enforcement? What do we need from the community in terms of them working with us to try to find that solution? So this is where every problem will have to be vetted through a very set format, and then people coming together to address that situation. That will require more resources here. In addition to that, we are looking at actually setting a formula to allow officers to be able to do that community engagement. I think you've probably all heard, and I've probably said it in the past, if you have few officers, it's hard to do the community engagement if you're going from call to call to call. The model that we will be implementing at Ingleside Station is a model that will be one of 40% calls for service. That means we will look at the trend in terms of the number of calls for service Ingleside Station officers have handled and ensure that there's sufficient staffing that they can keep that number at 40%. The other 60% of their time will then be dedicated to community engagement and problem solving. So we will be using data to come up with the model to make sure that we have the resources here at the station. In addition to that, we will be adding additional civilianization. We have what's commonly called the captain's staff, which are permit officers, subpoena officers, facility maintenance officers. Just by the title of those positions, you can determine that police experience is helpful, but it is not critical. So we will be looking at expanding the number of police service aides who are assigned to Ingleside to be able to pick up those roles and duties so that it will free up full-duty officers to be assigned to police duties. In addition to that, we have a centralized investigative bureau in the San Francisco Police Department. But we feel that there are a number of cases that sometimes do not rise up to the serious level that the investigators in the Investigations Bureau can handle. So we will be assigning 3 inspectors, members of the investigations team, to Ingleside Station so that they can work hand in glove with the captain, the lieutenants, on those cases that they feel truly are a priority at the district level that might not rise up to the Investigations Bureau level, and also to look at cases that maybe there's not enough information to prosecute or to arrest someone yet, but really to do more legwork there at the field level, at the district station level. That, we believe, is a positive step. And in fact, this morning I met 2 of the volunteers who are working here at Ingleside Station, and they are doing some of the work now. So I believe that that will be well incorporated into this overall plan. So we have a model, but we know that models are models until you actually work it through and put it into an operational model within where you're going to apply it. And so we're starting today. We have representatives from the PERF here that are meeting in other locations to meet with the team to put information out so that we can now start sharing with the rest of the department the opportunity here at Ingleside Station, because it will involve bringing new people to Ingleside. But we want people who are committed to ensuring that this model will then be developed here, but then will be slowly but surely put into the other districts of our city. Some people have said, why are we doing it in one station? As I mentioned at the beginning, we have to try things. We don't want to pilot something everywhere and have everything be not successful. So we want to start, make sure we have successful models, implement it. The other thing is that, as I've talked about new additions in terms of resources, you can think about the cost, the resources that we currently do not have. And so we will be maximizing our abilities in our applications for stimulus funding to use this, not only the organizational reviews, but our zone strategy, to explain how these are proven strategies and how by receiving federal stimulus grant funding, those funds could actually help the department in terms of implementing these measures in other parts of the city. So it's a very exciting time for our department, and it's really setting the course for the future of policing in San Francisco. It's not going to be done in a vacuum. The studies were not done in a vacuum. The community was actively involved in all of our studies. They gave input. And as Phase 1 rolls out, we will be engaging the Ingleside community from all perspectives so that everyone can have a say in building a model that will work for this community.
Thanks,
Thank
Chief.
you, sir.
And briefly, Kevin, you want to talk just a little bit about shot spotters? We've got these 3 districts where it's already in place and the $1 million that we're getting from the feds.
Yeah, Shot Spotters was rolled out as a pilot project and initially in 2 areas in the city. They're not entirely in the Bayview, they're not entirely in the Western Addition, nor is it entirely in the Mission. We've picked selected areas, much like the zone strategy. They were picked before I got here. Lieutenant Ali from the police department's the point of contact for that, working in the mayor's office. They're in roughly 1 square mile areas in each of these different districts, and they're deployed. We're having some really positive success with them. They're increasing our response time. We're getting on the scene much quicker. We are therefore able to collect evidence, perhaps get suspects, witnesses, and also save lives. We're working out, we're fine-tuning it. The Speaker has seen fit to continue to reward San Francisco with a $1 million supplemental that we are going to use to roll out in other parts of the city. There are challenges in each district. The Bayview has hills, has wind. Sometimes that affects its effectiveness. The Mission is different. The Western Addition is different. So each section of the town where we put this in has unique challenges, but we think it's a very positive thing. Other departments throughout the country are using it, and we're way ahead of the curve on that. We're going to interface it hopefully in with all these new recommendations and policing that we're going to be doing in San Francisco. It's a very positive step for San Franciscans.
So we've gotten, since 2005, 400 new patrol officers out in the streets. This district, I think, got 25 or 30 new officers. Mission, an equivalent amount. We hit that minimum staffing. We're committed to that. I'm committed, as long as I'm mayor, to that minimum staffing. We're going to get some support. The question is how much from the Obama administration to help supplement some of our general fund concerns. Homicides down as of this second, or at least an hour ago when we last checked, 64% in the city, 71% in this district, 100% in the Mission. Still too high in all these districts. Violent crime down 19.98. I said 20, but you guys get sometimes a little offended when I exaggerate. So 19.98% violent crime down year to date. We're seeing 6 months trends, not just these year-to-date trends coming from September in these hot spots where we're seeing real progress. Zone strategy seems to now be taking shape and working in our violence prevention strategies as well. I want to again just thank the men and women, the police department, for an outstanding job and for the cooperation and collaboration we've gotten throughout the diverse communities of the city, and the support from a number of members of the Board of Supervisors that recognize the importance of these efforts, and I want to thank them for their support as well. Any questions?
You mentioned that the jury is not. Is there in time now for investigators to perhaps work on the homicides that already exist, and is the clearance rate
Chief,
better?
It's a little of that, and I'll have the Chief answer a little bit more.
Yes, we have increased the number of investigators in homicide, and we had hoped to do that, but until we had the resources, we're now able to do that, and the investigators, because of the decreases, have had additional time to work on their cases. We know that a number of measures have been put in place. In fact, oftentimes we hear of CompStat in terms of overall strategy and making sure that we are looking at the areas that are problematic. We had actually implemented a CompStat model for the homicide section. That currently is the only section of the Investigations Bureau that has that model. And the reason we did that was because it's important to not only have the investigator talk about where they're at, but also to bring in the various components, whether it's gang, narcotics, forensics, the DA, all of these individuals have been sitting together, looking at these cases to make sure that, for instance, someone hadn't made a request for information and it was not prioritized in another area. So the key here is to always have that communication, and I think that you will see that there continues to be improvement. This year, the clearance rate is at 59%. It is higher than we have had in the past years, but again, the effort is continuing to be focused on making sure that not only current incidents are addressed and that the suspects are arrested, but also that past cases, as we know in homicides, there is no statute of limitations. We have a cold case unit that investigates not only homicides, but also sex crimes and burglaries. And so a lot of efforts are being put into this, and we will continue to work very hard in that area.
For the 11 homicides this year,
On clearances are accumulative. It's just as when a case, for instance, the mayor mentioned that we have 11 homicides this year. That is correct. The number is 11. 10 actually happened this year. 1 happened last year. But when the medical examiner says this person died as a result of a homicide, then that's when we count it. It's the same thing. When the case is cleared, that's the year that the clearance is counted. We don't go backwards.
59% of what?
We will get you those numbers, specific numbers. But it's 59% in terms of the cases this year. But it includes clearances from past years that were cleared this year. We'll explain that.
Well, actually, I wanted to ask you.
The bottom line, it's still too low. And
Right.
everyone in this town knows that. And we know there's reasons why. And it's not just the investigations division of our police department. And it goes to people reporting crimes and being willing to prosecute, be part of the prosecution of these crimes. It goes to why we have $250,000 rewards. I don't know many cities in the United States of America that have $100,000 rewards, let alone $250,000 rewards. It goes to one of the reasons we put crime cameras up to act not only as a deterrent against violent crimes, but also to catch people where folks aren't willing to say what they've seen. I mean, you've got a young lady who sits out front of City Hall every single day. I know who committed that crime that killed her son. She knows who committed that crime that killed her son. The police department knows who committed that crime that killed her son. The DA's office knows, and there's dozens of community members that do. Problem is, we don't have any DNA evidence to prosecute, and unless there's an eyewitness that can do it, not going to happen. I don't care how good your investigation team, and you have one of your best investigators on that, it's driven, I mean, it's miserably frustrating. And so it doesn't matter how good they are, at a certain point, there's other factors. And so again, it's still too low, but we're making progress.
What kind of crimes are up here today?
Of course you want bad news. Let me, you guys have the latest stats, and maybe we'll lead with that. What is, you guys have the latest?
Talk about robbers. We don't-
Yeah, maybe, there's a few. I'm sorry, but overall, sadly, they're down 19.98. And the homicides, which you've all been focused on, are down 64%. Well, I don't, here we are. Here's my list. You ready? Here's, well, sadly, they all show being down. This is not a good sign. Rapes are down, robberies are down, aggravated assaults are down. Rapes are down 24%, robberies down 17.76%, aggravated assaults 21%, burglaries 8.8%, auto boostings down 30.4%, larcenies 14.7%, motor vehicle theft 17.8%, arsons even down 19.67%. I think I got an editorial in one of the newspapers about the rapes, so I hope they mentioned they're down 24% since that editorial. And again, the homicides are down. So those are your Part 1 crimes. Now, these are Part 1. We're focusing today on those violent Part 1 crimes, the ones I listed. There are other crimes that are not on that list that are quality of life and that are still immeasurably problematic, that sort of fall into that community justice center strategy. And there are certainly areas where those are up. I don't have those today, but if you'd like them, we're happy to provide them tomorrow.
The thinking was that in a bad economy that the crime would actually be up.
No, I used to talk about that at tonight's 6 o'clock news. I think that's a great way to lead. You're right.
So
I can help write it if you'd like.
So why what's Go ahead.
But I agree. It's a great question. You're absolutely right. I mean, we were all told that in a recession, crime's supposed to go up.
You can do my story. I'll appoint a chief. We'll switch.
I'm looking. If you have anyone in mind, Rob. No, it's counterintuitive. I recognize that. It is.
So why is so? There must be some sort of theory as to why it's down.
Well, you can over-theorize. I remember 2 years ago I said violent crime went down, and then we had supervisors say that's an outrage, or this is an anomaly, and as if it was bad news, good news. Last year it went up, and I thought we were making a lot of progress. Remember, I said violent crime went down, but the homicides, we had some trouble. I said, no, but we're making real progress in these zones. These things sometimes are just inexplicable. I mean, you can have someone down south kill 6 people. All of a sudden, these stats mean nothing. I think the zone strategy is working, and the numbers bear that out. And they've been a trend line. We started February of last year, the zone strategy, and it just started in February, March, April, but it really started taking shape in that 3rd and 4th quarter. And I remember talking to all of you about what was happening in the Mission, and how frustrating that was, because we had already proactively got our tactical units, our specialty units, our gang task force units out there. You had more beat officers out there, and they actually witnessed a group driving by and then heard the gunshots. And I said, boy, we were doing everything we could to try to stop that, yet it's still, with impunity, we saw those homicides. But I do think the zone strategy has disproportionately been the big success story in the last 6+ months in this city. And so that would be the argument. I don't want to speak for the chief, but I think they've really hit on something that's now really taking shape.
I do believe that the zone strategy has been very helpful, but also it's focusing on those areas where we see a lot of crime. But in addition to that, having full staffing at the stations, having more resources, the officers can be out there in the various sectors, whether in a radio car, on a bicycle, on a foot beat, or in plain clothes. But I think that certain areas, we are seeing certain parts of the country are having more challenges. Fortunately, in San Francisco, we don't have the same foreclosure problem as some of our other neighboring jurisdictions. And so I think that there are some benefits of being in San Francisco, but at the same time, we all have to be vigilant, and I know many of the media have been very helpful in helping us not to react to crime, but to proactively address situations that could lead people to becoming victims. For instance, we've talked a lot about robberies and how people now are so prone to being robbed because we walk around with cell phones, we walk around with iPods, iPhones, with laptop computers, and these are electronic devices that people can steal and quickly sell and turn around. So these preventative measures are as important to make sure that a difficult economy doesn't bring us into a situation where we suddenly see spikes in crime. I know we've talked about auto boostings in the past. People leaving laptop computers, leather jackets, GPS systems. These are all items that are quickly turned around on the black market. And so again, if people take the steps ahead of time to prevent that from happening, then the crime doesn't happen. So it's really the partnership to prevent, but also when incidents happen, our officers are diligently responding. We are seeing some scams in terms of fraud type situations, the con games that we've talked about in the past, pigeon drop, get rich quick scams. And what we have seen is that in the real estate market, in terms of home loans, in terms of businesses that have taken money from people and then not returned the service, but we are also seeing these types of situations in our non-English speaking community. So it's very important that now more so than ever, it's wonderful to have some reductions. Now our goal is to sustain that with not only the efforts that are in place, but with the partnership of the community to help prevent those incidents from happening. And we will be putting some information out on 2 scams now, one that is not just in San Francisco, but that is going around the Bay Area, and then a second scam, which is very similar to a pigeon drop scam, but it's using gold bullions. So again, if something seems too good to be true, then we need to make sure people don't just get suckered into turning over a lot of money to people who are out there to con you.
And Rob, just another thing that was not insignificant was the work with MS-13. And the federal investigation was actually launched by then U.S. Attorney Kevin Ryan and followed up. It was a significant effort in partnership with the city to address some of the gang-related issues in the mission, and we think that's had a significant impact of recent. There's also a lot of buy-bust strategies. Some people support, some people oppose, but we think it's having an impact as well. And again, you're seeing with these resources, more people walking beats, more people out in these districts, being more responsive, the use of technology, et cetera, as we referenced with shot spotters and et cetera. The spirit, though, of this announcement is good enough never is. We're not here. Again, I want to just caution. These are, yesterday the stats showed 61% reduction in homicide. Today they're 64%. So they change every day. They could go in the opposite direction tomorrow. That's why sometimes these numbers are very fungible. They're based literally on a day-to-day tracking. And that's why we want you to know PERF we take seriously, and we're implementing. Shot spotters, we're not just stopping where we are. We're getting to more aggressive. We're not going to get below that 1971 for an extended period of time. We're going to keep doing more to get more officers walking the beat. We're not satisfied with the 59%. We've got to do more. 11 homicides, 10 or 11, too many. So we recognize that we need to keep stepping it up. Every time we announce good news, I get a lot of nasty emails saying, well, where do you live? Because in my district, it doesn't feel like that. And I get that. That's why the non-fatal shootings, to me, are a very significant indicator of success. What's happening at the emergency rooms, an indicator of success or failure. And those are significant numbers as well, with a broader and longer trend line than even the homicides. Those numbers have been going down for over 9 months, the non-fatal shootings. We want to keep those going. And again, I want to connect the zone strategy disproportionately to some of that good news.
There were there were non-fatal shootings last weekend. What does that say to you?
That's exactly, you rewind the tape, everything I just said, that's my answer to that question.
Well,
I mean, I'm not being flip, I mean sort of literal. I said none of these are good enough, non-fatal shootings matter, that people still recognize we need to reconcile the amount of violence in the city, that we need to do more and better, and that the whole purpose of this announcement is not to look in the rearview mirror at 64% or 71% or 100% decline in the mission on homicides, but to prospectively look and say we've got to do a better job. So that's what it means to me.
It's kind of difficult for us to do an objective analysis of this because you haven't given us, or no, not you specifically, but the police department hasn't given us any of the paper trail, the statistical information. And I know I cover the supervisor's public safety meeting every 2 weeks or so. And Mr.
You write this down, 11, 28, 24.
Well, I know, but there's lots more information.
11, 28, 24.
I know,
there it is. But no, but I don't mean to be flip because these, I'm happy to provide.
This
but we're
isn't
providing
really adequate.
But
it
it's,
really isn't because
okay.
there's a lot of statistics and they're presented every 2 weeks and they go back and they cover different time periods and you've given us a 4-month capsule.
I'm giving you year-to-date numbers.
Excuse me, a 6-month capsule
and 6 months.
of time that you have selected out for whatever
it was a
reason.
calendar. The reason we pick 6 is sometimes people want mid-year or half a year.
Well, it's not normally the...
But I'll give you then,
it's
disregard, here's what you can do. I'll make your story easy.
No, I'm just saying it would be helpful to have the written
Okay, but
backup
it's just
material and it's...
homicides year-to-date, 11, 28, 24. It's not that, I mean, some of this is really not complicated. It doesn't require much more than that. It's pretty clear. Year-to-date, in the calendar year, 2009, we've had 11 homicides, 10 that happened in this calendar year, 1 that happened in the previous calendar year. Year-to-date, in the previous calendar year, you had 28 homicides, arguably 29. In the previous calendar year, you had 24. That goes back to 2007. I'm happy to put that in writing. I gave you the specific stats. They're on your tape. I read every single one of them as it relates to...
But those aren't
but that's all the
stats.
those are all...
And
those
this is
are...
for a
I'll finish.
small period of
Those are
time.
year-to-date numbers that are important. Year-to-date in San Francisco, calendar year 2009 versus year-to-date calendar year 2008, on Part 1 violent crimes. This is the same story you do every year, Part 1 violent crimes. It's the same, it's an apple-to-apple comparison. So Barb, I'm happy to get them in writing. It's very easy sometimes when we have bad news that you don't need those stories. When it's good, I hope that it's that easy as well.
Well, I generally have 10 pages of statistical information that I go over.
This is on tape. I read them out in detail, so I think it's all right there. I don't mean to be flip, but I don't also understand why it's not.
Can I just ask you, the zone strategy you've talked about is working. Is there a place that you could draw a bright line, zone strategy, here's a neighborhood or a place that's made a difference, what the difference is, where it is, something specific?
Certainly. Kevin Cashman, Deputy Chief of Field Operations. The zone strategy was implemented on February 5th of last year. It incorporates 5 high-crime areas of San Francisco. Basically, we had some analysis done by Dr. Anthony Baraga, the Harvard School, Kennedy School of Government, and his detailed analysis proved that 45 to 50% of the violent crime in San Francisco occurs in about 2% of the geography. Those areas are 1, the Tenderloin area, 2, the Western Addition, 3, the Mission District, and 4, the Bayview District, and 5, Visitation Valley. And basically his findings found that a very small number of people are responsible for a great deal of the violent crime in a very small geographic area of the San Francisco. Therefore, we tailored the zone strategy in response to those findings.
Have you seen a corresponding dip in those areas?
We have, yes. We gave a detailed analysis in mid-February at the Police Commission.
Yeah, that's public, and that was provided to the commission in detail, and that's been available. It's on the blog, and we do, Barbara, you know we do a monthly blog? We blog every day. So MOCJ puts this online.
Yeah, I just like to have the statistics. I don't think that's all that too much.
Right, no, and that's why we provided them today, and they're online, and they're on our blog, and they've been presented, and I've tried to go in detail about them as well.
I'm just wondering, this to understand what that means to the police department and which area you're cutting.
Well, that's, you saw we pulled back in some of the mid-year adjustments, the academy classes. That's why I referenced the work we're trying to do, getting the federal stimulus to actually try to get some federal cops money. That's the money that provides resources to backfill some of the cuts in local municipal police agencies and try to get those academy classes moving. We have these burn grants, which are what they call JAG burn grants. I won't bore you with the technical side, which we announced that we've already received some formula money for, and we're going after some of the competitive dollars for to offset some of those cuts. So you're not going to see a 25% reduction in the staffing level or the overall budget at the police department. Actually, police departments are going to get a not insignificant, I won't say it's significant, but not insignificant number of dollars from the federal government that will substantially help offset some of those cuts that we otherwise would experience.
When it's all said and done, there won't be cuts in the police department?
There will be. And they'll be judicious, and they'll be thoughtful, but they'll maintain the principles that I outlined today, the things we won't cut, meaning we're going to keep, as I said, the spirit of the entire conversation. So we hit that minimum staffing. We're bouncing around 10 to 20, above, below. I want to keep in that range regardless of the budget climate. So we're committing to that. We're going to commit to the resourcing of this zone strategy. We're going to commit to new technologies with federal dollars, leveraging other grant dollars, stimulus dollars, as well as omnibus spending dollars, which is that congressionally directed money that may go away in the future, as well as the competitive grants that should offset the cost. Well, there's all kind. We've got, you're going to hear all about that in the next few weeks. You're going to see all the department submittals. The commission's talked a lot about it. There are 101 specific strategies. The police department does a lot of things that I don't think they need to be doing in terms of permitting and in terms of work, some civilianization work. There's new ways of doing business. There'll be a lot of reforms that are not just part of a perf, but part of a general narrative of reforms. There'll be some other cuts, but you're not going to see less police officers, is my point. You're going to see arguably more in the next few years. It's going to be more difficult, but we'll find other ways of funding it, is my point, not just the general fund.
Chief, how many in the murders that have occurred this year, and then I guess the last 6 months of those, and how many of them have arrests been made?
I'll have to get you those numbers. We'll have our PAOs provide that too.
No, but I will remind you, one of the reasons the jail costs in this town are going up is the number of arrests in this city have gone up substantially. This police department's been doing a very effective job in increasing arrests. Some people are not happy about that, and I think there's a lot of hearings at the Board of Supervisors, people not happy with the number of arrests, but the arrests have gone up substantially, not just in these violent crime, but across the board, and that's why the jail overcrowding's become a bigger issue. Thank you all.
Thank you, Mr.
Thanks,
Mayor.
Chief.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
No problem.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.